But even though I'm 900 years old, I still have better technique than someone who will never
Why
be the
take
first
any
future
more
American world
risks?
champion.
The drama between Hikaru Nakamura and Hans Niemann never ends. It was first during the cheating scandal, where Hikaru got very suspicious of Hans.
I don't even need to show variations, you just look at the position, yeah? Like, okay, let's say...
Wait, did he just literally say I don't need to show variations?
Then in the Speed Chess Championship, where Hans trash-talked Hikaru.
My reign is gonna last so long that he's gonna be at the age of he can't even walk anymore, and I'm still gonna be winning.
And then, Hikaru destroyed him and did his own trash talking.
The fact is, 3 of the 4 players here are at a certain level. I mean, maybe yesterday didn't go my way, but I think it showed that, that when Hans says all these things, he's just not at the same level.
So these two obviously have a lot of history, and so when they face each other in Title Tuesday, there's a lot on the line for their egos. Alright, so if you don't already know, Title Tuesday is in a 3+1 format. That means players have 3 minutes each, and they get 1 second back for each move. So Hikaru starts out with b3, which is an opening that he likes to play a lot. Hans takes the center, and we get bishop b2, knight f6. And I mean, the opening is like pretty normal stuff. These players aren't really spending any time on these moves because they're just blitzing it out, and this is like relatively well-known theory. And now it's equal, but Hikaru has completely given up the center for just a knight on f3 and a bishop on b2. But the reason why this is equal and not just losing for Hikaru is because he has very strong counterplay with his pieces. Like, for example, e5 is already hanging. He can quickly castle bishop e2, and like he's gonna eventually want to bring his queen in, and he's probably gonna go for a pawn break like e4 or maybe even d4. So Hans defends, and Hikaru puts another bishop on this fianchetto diagonal, and then he just castles. And now, again, very equal position, but Hans completely has control of the center, while Hikaru has 2 bishops that are just insanely strong and very good chances to try to crack open the center. That's just the idea with these openings like this, where you fianchetto your bishops and you don't commit anything into the center, but you try to slowly crack it open. So now in the middle game, players are just maneuvering their pieces around, and here we have a pawn break. And as I said earlier, now Hikaru finally has enough pieces defending this e4 square, and so he's going to go for this pawn break and open up the center. Hans decides to keep the tension with knight c6, so there's still both of these taking possibilities, and Hikaru stops d4 with c3, but Hans actually still plays d4 to try to just get more space, and Hikaru brings his knight to a3, just activating it into a better square and potentially going to b4 to kind of bother some pieces here. So takes, and the knight jumps in, and Hikaru makes kind of a battery on this diagonal. And then now Hans is trying to maneuver around his pieces. The idea with knight h7 is you just want to put it on a stronger square, which is either like maybe f8 to e6 or just simply go to g5. So take, and the queen goes to c2. And so Hans solidifies his pawn structure, and Hikaru puts his knight in the middle. And at this point, both players have probably around a minute 30 to a minute on the clocks. And that just goes to show how strong the instincts of these players are, because they're like snap playing these moves without thinking at all. And most of these are like top engine moves, so they're playing extremely accurately and extremely quickly. So Hans decides to put his knight on g5, and Hikaru goes h4, kicking it away. Hans reroutes it to e6, and Hikaru just maneuvers more of his pieces to better squares, because before this bishop was staring into nothing. So bishop h3, and the queen goes back. And now Hikaru trades, takes, and here both players are kind of just maneuvering around the pieces a little bit. And here Hans decides to go for a big commitment. And here he decides to sacrifice the rook, with the idea being that he goes into an endgame with white having rook against rook bishop pawn, I guess. And basically he's just arguing that the extra point in material isn't worth as much as the activity of black's pieces, because black has a lot of play going with like f5, e4, and just putting pressure on this pawn constantly, and just trying to win material out of this endgame because his pieces are better placed and more active. But that's definitely a very risky decision, and I'd say it would have worked against anyone other than Hikaru. But Hans decides to go for this f5 idea, eventually going e4 and pawn storming on this side. And Hikaru plays h5, kind of just stopping the king from going anywhere and preventing any g5 ideas. And at this point, both players have around 5 to 10 seconds left, and they're literally just playing on the 1 second increment. So that means they have to play each move in less than a second, or else like statistically they'll flag. And so these moves are being played extremely quickly. Hans brings his king in, and Hikaru has to defend this with his rook. And you see both of his rooks are tied down defending his pawns. And Black's rook is very active, cutting off this king, putting pressure here. And he's going to eventually have ideas of pushing these pawns and creating a passer on either the queen side or the king side. He has play on both sides of the board. They're snap playing these moves. That's why not much progress is being made, but Hans slowly by slowly moving forward with his king, moving forward with his pawns, and Hikaru gets a rook here. This is much more active than it is being tied down on the h file defending this pawn, because now it's cutting off the king here, putting pressure here so the bishop can't leave this diagonal, and this rook is cutting off the king here. So this king is literally stuck. It has no moves, and now white is doing much better. It's a +1 advantage because he's up in exchange for a pawn, and this king is completely immobilized. So black has no compensation anymore. Hikaru offers a trade of rooks, Hans moves back, and now the pieces are just maneuvered more, and like the players are just shuffling their pieces because they both have no time left, and they're just keep on shuffling. They have like 3, 4, 5 seconds left on the clock here. Just keep going. They trade pawns like this, and now black has a 2-on-1 on the king side. But it's very hard to do anything with this because now this rook is cutting off here like this, and like a rook on e4 is just very solid. You can never push this pawn immediately because this just hangs. And so it's going to be hard for Hans to break through on the king side, but he does have this powerful asset of these two connected almost passers. This pawn's a pass pawn, this pawn still has to deal with this pawn. So they're just shuffling their pieces, and Hans is slowly but surely pushing, and Hikaru is also trying to push, but this is actually almost a blunder, I think. Here, black has king g4, because now the king is supporting this pawn, and it's just really hard to stop. You have to probably bring your own king, bring your rook back or something, but then this pawn falls, and it's just hard to deal with. But I think Hikaru missed it, and he went here, Hans missed it, and he went here, but this is still not bad, because f4 is just not a very good move, because the rook will never go to e5, and it's tied down defending this, and king g4 is always an option. But these players, again, I have like 2-3 seconds left, and they're just playing on the 1 second increment. So king advances. Here Hikaru sacrifices a pawn in order to give clearance to his rook to see this and cut off the king here. But now black is minus 2.6, almost minus 3. This should be completely winning for Hans, but he has like 5 seconds left. He has, oh my, okay, I accidentally hit the up arrow, bro. That's like, why is that even a feature on chess.com? Okay, anyways, but okay, after he sacks his pawn, Hans now has 2 connected pass pawns on the king side. It's extremely hard to stop just with these 2 major pieces, and he's just pushing. And here he blunders, and the evaluation is almost equal now, because now the king cannot support these pawns anymore. The king is cut off here. There's a lot of pressure on this bishop. If this bishop moves, there's like rook f5 or like rook f5 like this or something, and coming in like this. It's now his king is just very poorly placed. His pieces are not coordinated at all, and it's going to be harder to support these pawns. And so check, almost perpetual, but Hans goes to d5, and now Hikaru is bothering all of these pawns. You can't push them an inch, and so Hans gives a check, and now Hikaru brings his queen in. They trade rooks, and now this is just equal, just dead. Just the engine says it's dead equal, but it's extremely imbalanced because there's bishop pawn. Both pawns are passed, and they're very close to promotion, but this rook and this king are just tying them down. Engine says it's equal because it has no idea what to do in this position. There's just too many possibilities, but slowly but surely, Hikaru manages and finds a way to win this pawn on h4. I shouldn't say win. Hans just blunders it with like half a second left on the clock. Hikaru has like 2 seconds left too. And they're just constantly playing on this increment. And now it's going to be very hard to hang on to this pawn on g3. So Hikaru is able to bring his king in as long as he keeps his rook on this g file. This pawn can never advance. So he gives a check, he keeps on bringing his king in, he wins this pawn because now after the king is on d6, it's shielding the bishop so it can't take this. So he wins the other pawn. Hikaru is simply up in exchange, completely winning endgame. He like a few more moves, they play this out. Hans sacks another pawn to try to get some clearance, to try to get anything, but it's hopeless. And Hikaru secures a victory. This was the last game in Title Tuesday, and he wins the entire event. If Hans had won this game, he would have won Title Tuesday. And this Title Tuesday was actually, I think, doubled a prize pool since there were over 1,000 players. So Hans missed out big. This was a 100-move game. They played like, I think even like 60 moves ago. Here they had like 10 seconds left. So they played 60 moves. Each move in less than like half a second, in less than a second, and Hikaru came out on top because he's just a goat of speed chess. But the rivalry definitely doesn't end here, and honestly, sometimes I'm kind of rooting for Hans because he's just different from the rest of the like Russian grandmasters that's like always cranky and stuff. All right, thanks for watching. Consider liking and subscribing and commenting.